Good evening and welcome to EvilGinger Miniatures, my Tuesday chat where we're going to be talking a bit about planning terrain. Now, those of you who have followed me for any length of time will be aware that I have developed a bit of a thing for the KNIL, the Dutch East Indies Army, having been dragged into it by young Sander of May 40s Miniature, who sent me some models to paint before the Kickstarter, which is now over, and there's been a post Kickstarter where I've ordered even more of the beautiful things. They're not wretched. That is just a turn of phrase. They're absolutely lovely. They are Perry-esque models, and I want to get the sculptor doing projects for me at some point in the future. He's that good. Traditionally sculpted, traditionally cast, metal, one-piece metal models for the most part, and utterly gorgeous. Don't have any to hand because they're currently up in the office in a box with boxes piled on top of it, because I have still got to the next stage of sorting the office out. When they're sorted out, they will be to hand. But I am planning scenery for the setting because I don't have anything. I have a tiny amount also in the office upstairs in a box of jungle scenery which I built a while ago when Ghost Archipelago just came out, and it's just generic jungle scenery, and there's a lot more to do that's specific to both Java, the Dutch East Indies as a whole, and probably also Malaya and other areas. So there's a lot of generic jungle scenery to do. There's also some specific scenery and things like rice paddies, which could also go to Vietnam, and various forms of local and colonial architecture, some of which could cross into the European theatre, especially the very European looking houses. But having said that, I was getting prepped and I forgot something, which I've probably shown people. And I'll just put it off screen, because it's a bit of a monster. It worked out taller than I thought it was going to be, shall we say. So, I also was recommended for a change, something useful in my Facebook feed, Storm of Steel's video on making jungle terrain, and it was very interesting. I don't entirely agree with everything he did, but it was inspirational because it got me thinking and got me going off on my own thing in that respect. So what we're going to be talking about this evening is planning. Contrary to popular opinion, I do plan things. Hi, Sean. You caught at the beginning of your stream for a change, so you can watch and comment and whatever, and I can actually answer to you. Good evening, sir. Anyway, basically there are several pieces. I'm going to do jungle. I'm also going to do rice paddies, and it's rice paddies I'm starting off with. Bought these to do rice paddies on. They are fairly standard war bases, terrain bases, which are 2mm thick MDF. You can get them in 3mm if you like it a little bit more sturdy. I'm also considering building low hills because they are mirrors of each other, and you can actually fiddle about with them and flip them around so that the whole thing lines up like that, and you can use milliput to just add a little bit of a bump, because lumps and bumps make a great deal of difference on what is basically a skirmish war game. So that's one of the other things I'll be doing with these. But basically what I'm planning to do with these, and this will probably, is if this is going to be a rice paddy, it's going to need a bund around the edge of it to keep the water in. And it will have that bund around it whether or not it's fallow and dry or got rice growing in it. Now, Storm of Steel did his with plastic card, which I find is not particularly pleasant to work with. I prefer working with potties and softer materials like foam card. So the way I'm going to do the bunds, and I don't have any foam card to hand, otherwise I'd be doing it on stream, is I will be making the bund core out of strips of probably 5mm thick, 3 and 5mm thick foam card, and you can just use A4 for this quite easily. Could also lay it on top and cut the thing out and make more lumps and bumps with foam card. That's also a thing. But basically, make the bund out of that, round it off with milliput, my usual standard milliput, and finish it with sand and static grass and painted earth. Probably won't be using the round pastes that Storm of Steel ended up using, because I find applying gritty stuff with a brush is a good way to completely kill a brush. And given how much I kill brushes anyway, probably making things, don't encourage me, shall we say. But these will be paddies. There probably will be more of them. We'll also need a channel for a river, because obviously the way the paddies are flooded is that they dig a temporarily channel between them. They also dig temporary channels to allow the water out, to drain them when the rice gets to that stage of operation. So basically there are 3 moderate and small paddies, but also rubber trees. Now these are a Dutch East Indies speciality, and is actually the reason the Japanese invaded, because they wanted to get rubber and the oil. Again, oil derricks are another thing I'm going to have to be doing, because again, the Dutch oil fields, and not done that much research on Malaya, but I think they might have had some there as well. So I'll be doing those. These I'm not so sure about. These originally I bought, again, they're war bases, vehicle bases. The war bases, vehicle bases, and they are, hence the line on them. And I originally bought them to do rubber trees. You get some basic cheap trees off of eBay, and then you do mount them through foam board onto these, and you'd have a line of trees, and you'd have several banks of these as beginnings of a rubber plantation. Not so sure about that now. I'm thinking more in terms of doing something a bit more regular than this, and having these for using these as jungle terrain or jungle hillocks, where you basically you build a little hill and you put some bamboo on it and trees and use it as blocking terrain. Again, I tend to have things to be as three-dimensional as possible. That's the whole point of 28mm, really. Though all of these bits of scenery could be arguably multi-scale like most terrain. You're then going, and of course I need jungle tracks and things like that, and war bases do some very nice flat tracks, and there are some dirt tracks and other stuff that I can work on. I've got a box fit somewhere that I put edgings on for roads, and didn't get any further than that. So again, there's more terrain to be done. This is intended for demos at Books and Banter, where I'll probably be getting young Shawnee, who's in the chat, to do some logistical stuff, because getting big piles of figures down on without a vehicle is its own sort of fun, and not terribly practical unless I get the goods bike out and get that refurbished, and it gets complicated at that point. Wall bases also do an absolute load of pre-designed MDF kits, and I should be taking advantage of those to build as many buildings as I can. This is an example of one. This one I bought as a order filler and constructed, and it's quite, the roof comes off like all wall bases stuff. This is a watchtower, and I'd fun constructing it, especially this bit where I had to super glue the bits of wood together, the MDF together, to get it to stay put firm enough that I could construct the rest. Though ideally you would use white glue on this. You'd need to jig this if you were using white glue, because it won't hold together and you can't get it to hold together in relation to itself while it's setting otherwise. This is 28mm scale, obviously because I'm doing the KNIL in 28mm, but they do a number of what you might describe as local or native huts on stilts in various sizes, and I will be getting one of those. This comes on a square base. You can probably see inside the grey of the primed milliput groundwork. But I bought another wall bases base, another one of their terrain bases in different dimensions, to put it on a little bit of a rise, because obviously even those are quite tall towers, they'd be built on a bit of a rise. I like the roofs on these. They're beautiful. I like them. He's put a lot of effort into that. However, I don't like the little tabs and the fact that almost invariably, if you're doing MDF, you get a gap. Now, normally I'd cover that with thatch, and I was originally going to do this with this one. However, I'm not sure. It could be done with thatch, which is again more milliput, which I use for everything, you might have noticed. Or I can attempt to do some work with some fairly thin card to mask the hole this bit have at the top. You should really have a pole in it, I think, because the planks I think were initially lashed to a pole, and probably bamboo actually. Yeah, bamboo pole across the top, and just use pieces of thin card to mask the tabs. But most of the rest of the tabs are fairly well hidden, and I don't think you'll see them that much when they're painted. This is why I do extra work on MDF scenery for the most part, is that to make them look a little less like scenery, so you can't see the tabs and the joins. Okay. What I'm probably going to use for the rubber trees, and again, there'll be a low mound on them, is that wall bases do, or I can commission wall bases to do, larger versions of their standard pill base. I think they do a very long pill base, might be 100mm long and about 50 or 60 wide, but do the trees on very long pill bases with the appropriate section of these are 25 by 50 ones, but if you did them on longer ones, say 120s and maybe that wide, you could get a decent strip of trees, and it would look as they would have done. The rubber plantations would look regular. Rubber trees would also need a bit of work on them, because you will want the classic V scar on them, and at least the place where they put the pot that collects the rubber. If not actually the pot's in place, because the latex runs down little V's in the tree, which are cut into the bark, because obviously the rubber is sapped from the tree, the raw rubber is sapped from the tree, and it drips into these containers, and then it's worked on from there. I'm not sure exactly what the processing to get latex from there, but that's the start of it. It's also incidentally the way they collect things like maple syrup. You hurt the tree bleeds, you set the bleed up so it runs down into a container, and then you collect the container when it's full. Fairly labour intensive, but you can just machete either side of the tree if you've got a bit of skill with a machete, or you can actually score it with a knife. But so basically there will be areas of those, and I've yet to find out how big the areas are likely to be, but obviously I'm going to want a couple of square feet of them on a classic tabletop potentially, and just build up to do that. And as I'll be buying and mounting a lot of scenery, a lot of bases for scenery, it's just going to be a big thing. And again, take it down to Books and Banter and do jungle warfare scenarios with it. Same way as I tend to take stuff down to Books and Banter and do European War Blitzkrieg in Holland, Blitzkrieg in Belgium, when I get some 25mm figures for Belgian troops, and generally Blitzkrieg in France, because there are a lot of BEF uniformed British and early war French available, and you can actually build quite large formations. And obviously there were Germans, you can use the same Germans to fight everybody, because they were effectively the opposing force. There were some differences of equipment, but the frontline troops, first wave troops that they used, are pretty identical, whether they're infantry, panzer grenadiers, or cavalry. Once dismounted, you can't tell the difference really. So that's another project that I've got on, along with a World War I project that I'm thinking about. I bought a load of stuff for it last Partisan and have done nothing with it since, mostly because I had a bit of mental health fun immediately following that, to do with Books and Banter temporarily closing and other shenanigans, which rather delayed things. I've also, I have to admit, been building more ruins, and I've had to actually restrain myself physically to stop turning these into more ruins, because I don't need them. I do actually have more of these sitting on a shelf somewhere that I noticed when I was clearing up, and those will also get turned into more paddy fields, more than likely, either paddy fields or areas of jungle, sorry, not dungeon, silly man. Thinking about the horrible things I'm going to do with the D&D party on Thursday. Been planning that for a while, because I but I've been wanting them all together before I did it to them. So that's the terrain plan at the minute, and I'm really buzzing for that, and for getting Books and Banter up and running as a wargaming venue. I even managed to get £10 out of the Yorkshireman, who will remain nameless to protect the guilty. And if you do have any money, do drop a tenner or so, drop some of it into the fundraiser. It's getting towards the end. We're still short of the target, but we need to push, because every little helps. And because you're never safe entirely from ruins, there's a couple more of them. Now, these I didn't get over at the start because I'd only just painted them. This is a grubbed out house, 2 alarms and a stairwell. And these would have been built up to, say, 3 blocks off the floor, and then the rest of it would be half timbered. And probably the upper floor would be bigger. But I will be doing, these are going to be finished in this style, which would be finished apart from the fact I think the glue, I'm just making sure the glue's gone off before I fix any damage. The gluing is done, which is done to some of them. So these will be finished to that sort of style. But I will be doing some Mordheim ones. Mordheim ones are different in that they are burnt out ruins, smashed up and burnt out. So there'll be ones like that, ones with fairly intact stonework down to the ground level. So they'll all be about that height, and they'll have burnt off level when they caught fire due to the meteor that dropped all the warp stone in there. So they'll be a little bit more intact looking, and then there will be the more intact buildings, which will actually have some of the superstructure built on top of this base. But these will be these are the sort of things I will be using as basis for the Mordheim buildings, and I'm planning on building some Mordheim warbands to demo that at Book and Banter as well. So, but these can also be used in all sorts of other games, Rangers of Shadow Deep, perhaps even Silver Bayonet and that sort of thing, because these would look out of place as Northern European half-timbered buildings that are long past their sell-by date. But there are lots of those, and I've even been doing specialist type stuff, because this is the blacksmiths that are built, well, metalworking shop, because there's a little hearth there. The floor's paved rather than being planked, because you don't want to the floor catching fire. And this would have been probably an all brick built building, the brick built to a much higher level. But again, as I wanted it as a grubbed out ruin, the easier to get at stones have been removed. This has probably had about one coat of Fanatic primer on it, Fanatic grey primer, and I've missed some little bits and pieces which I need to go back over, and I also need to do the rest of the finishing, which we're working building sand into the fine sand into the cracks between the blocks, and using the usual sharp sand mix everywhere else. Probably putting some bits and pieces of coarse sand in there and painting them a dark colour to make them look like bits of coal and burnt wood, burnt charcoal. But that's a forge. There's also a well, which is over there on the other desk, another stage of operation, where I've actually started putting sand on those. And I'm going to have a little village by the time I've finished. And then I will start the Mordheim ones and be doing all sorts of things. So I'm going to be really busy. Also, potential, I might be selling this on the Etsy shop, which again needs more attention and more time. And I think I might need to go on amphetamines just to stay awake long enough to do it. But we shall see about that. So, anybody got any comments? Because I will witter along until I run out of steam, and as I have coffee, that might take an awful long time. Trees, by the way, will be either, in the rubber tree cases, cheap, and a lot of the jungle trees, cheap off eBay, with some work done on them, or there'll be aquarium plants with work done on them, mostly because aquarium plants are shiny, so they will need priming, which means I'm probably going to have to get the gas mask out and go outside and spray prime, because spray priming doesn't agree with me. Though I will be probably trying out the stuff that Sean in the comments suggested, because I'm not a fan of the army painter sprays, and he swears by that, so I'm going to give it a go on his recommendation. Also, Books and Banter sells it, so a little bit of support for your local game shop is always a thing. After all, you know, the amount of free work I did for Spirit over the years, as well as the paid for weekend cover and stuff, because we want our local game shop to thrive and to be a centre of the community and all that sort of thing. So please be aware that the fundraiser is still going on, and do what you can, because it will be appreciated, and I might even buy you a free coffee. Anyway, I'm probably going to be winding it down around about now, because I'm running out of things to say and I don't want to keep people going forever, and I've got lots of stuff to paint still. Yeah, I can. Which reminds me, I'm going to be doing tutorials. The reason I haven't been doing tutorials is because I've got an awful setup here. I can barely get live. I've got a camera. I've got another camera, which is around here somewhere and out of use. This one. But it's really designed for it's a nice camera, I think, but it's really designed for sitting on top of a monitor and for fixed focal distance. So it works the same as the camera on here, effectively. And had a bit of an argument on one of these streams with it not working properly, which was annoying. But I can do tutorials. The tutorials will be done with a head camera, because I am buying a head-mounted camera, so you can see me painting away, so you can actually see work, and I don't have to do what I do here, which is wave it at the camera, which is a bit of a tradition an idea I picked up off from young Annie, because robbing her good ideas and fire at the same, and Simonizing them, we will say, could say improving, but definitely gingerizing them is a thing. So basically, I'll be doing tutorials. They won't just be painting tutorials, they'll be modeling and basing tutorials. And there are all sorts of little tricks. Mostly involves using the liberal use of British standard sharp sand and paint. As I say, you can get the paste, you can get paste to do the same thing, but effectively what I do is I do it in stages. It's like Mod Podge. You can make your own Mod Podge, which is a sort of render you put on foam card and on MDF buildings to give it a texture it doesn't otherwise have, because obviously MDF is smooth by default. And whilst to scale, completely smooth is probably fairly accurate for most buildings, because remember, it's their 156 or 1 to 100 scale, so any mark detail is 100 times smaller on the model, and they are full size. It just looks peculiar if it doesn't have any texture, and it's a thing in the viewer's head, I'm sure, because strictly to scale, a lot of stuff that people paint and put on models is overscale, and I come of a period when this was frowned on, but no, it isn't. And people put stickers, put transfers and all sorts of things on there that you couldn't actually see at any range, and certainly you couldn't see on the sort of range, because distance and scaling are equivalent. I'll have to dig out the chart and post it somewhere. Also, color changes with scale, or should change with scale, because as you know, images are not, but the eyesight is an interesting piece of kit and doesn't actually work quite as much like digital cameras, a lot of people think. But basically, the Mod Podge I use is fine sand. I use silver sand, polyfiller, the powdered stuff, white glue and water. You mix it up together and you paint it on with a brush you really hate. This one hasn't been used for it, but basically they end up in a worse state than this when they're finished, because you've got grit in there, you've got glue in there, you've got plaster in there, and you're rubbing it over stuff, and it will abrade the living daylights out of the end of the brush. Chisel-shaped brushes like these are useful, but for God's sake, if you're going to buy brushes to do this, get some really cheap synthetic ones that you really don't expect to use again. I mean, this one was used for painting scenery, and as you can see, it didn't last very long. And if I'd used it on this painting Mod Podge on it, it would be rock hard by now, and I would have something that I'd have to it wouldn't work at all. This currently gets used a bit as a dusting brush and can be used for dry brushing if you want an irregularly dry brush. We will have a coffee and a natter on Thursday, Sean, but I'm going to go off and get on with some work now, if that's okay with everybody, and I will see you all next week at the earliest, and hopefully head camera is coming soon and you'll be able to see more of me without my lovely, lovely, handsome, stunning face in it. Goodbye for now, and take care everyone. And where's the end stream button? So I can never find the start stream button, and I can't find the end stream button. Here we are.